Imagine yourself 1 year from now. You're calmer. You're not checking your phone every 5 minutes, wondering if someone finally noticed you pulled away. You're not replaying conversations in your head, analysing what you should have said. You sleep better. You breathe easier. The people around you now actually want to be there, not because you chased them, but because they chose you. You finally feel like yourself again. But peace wasn't always this quiet. There was a version of you not long ago who didn't know how to stop giving. Who thought love meant tolerating. Who believed that silence was rejection and distance was failure. That version of you had to learn the hard way that sometimes the only way to find yourself is to let others lose you first. So let's go back. Back to where the noise started fading. Back to where you made a decision that felt like loss but turned out to be liberation. Back to where the silence began. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt truly wanted without having to earn it? When was the last time someone showed up for you the way you've been showing up for everyone else? Not because you asked, not because you hinted, but because they simply wanted to. If you had to think about it for more than a second, that tells you something. And it's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to pay attention to. Most of us grow up learning how to give. We're taught that good people are generous with their time, their energy, their love. And that's true. But somewhere along the way, we confused generosity with desperation. We started giving not because it felt right, but because we were terrified of what would happen if we stopped. We thought that if we paused, even for a moment, people would forget us. They'd move on. They'd realise they never needed us in the first place. So we kept going. We kept texting first. We kept making the plans. We kept being the friend who remembers birthdays, the partner who apologises first, even when we weren't wrong, the family member who smooths over every conflict. And every time we did it, we told ourselves it was love. But deep down, we knew the truth. It wasn't love. It was fear dressed up as kindness. Here's what I've learned, and I wish someone had told me this years ago. When you're always the one reaching out, you never get to find out who would reach back. You rob yourself of that knowledge. You fill the silence before it has a chance to speak. And silence, as uncomfortable as it is, has a lot to say. I used to be terrified of silence. In conversations, in relationships, in my own head. I thought silence meant something was wrong. That if someone wasn't talking to me, they were upset. That if I wasn't constantly in contact with people, I would be forgotten. So I filled every gap. I over-explained. I over-apologised. I made myself smaller and louder at the same time, shrinking my needs while amplifying my presence, just to make sure no one had a reason to leave. But people left anyway, not because I wasn't enough, but because I did too many of the wrong things. Too available, too predictable, too willing to accept crumbs and call it a meal. And every time someone walked away, I blamed myself. I thought I hadn't tried hard enough, so I tried harder the next time. And the cycle continued, until one day I just stopped. Not dramatically, not with a big announcement or a burning of bridges. I just got tired. Tired of being the only one who remembered. Tired of feeling like a convenience instead of a priority. Tired of pouring into cups that had holes in the bottom. So I put the pitcher down. I stopped texting first. I stopped making all the plans. I stopped being the one who always broke the silence. And what happened next surprised me. Some people disappeared. And I mean completely. People I thought were close to me, people I would have sworn cared about me, just vanished into the quiet. At first it hurt. It hurt more than I expected. Because the silence confirmed what I had been afraid of all along. That without my effort, there was nothing holding us together. But here's the thing. That pain didn't last. What replaced it was something I hadn't felt in years: clarity. For the first time, I could see my relationships for what they actually were, not what I had been imagining them to be, and some of them were beautiful. Some people did reach out. Some people noticed I was quieter and asked if I was okay. Those people mattered. Those people were real. And the rest? The rest were just noise I had been mistaking for connection. That's when I realized something that changed how I moved through the world. My silence wasn't rejection. It was a filter. It was a way of finding out who stays when I stop performing, who shows up when I stop chasing, who cares when I stop asking them to. And from there, silence became my teacher. Let me tell you something about reaction. It feels powerful at the moment. Someone says something that gets under your skin, and your whole body wants to respond. Your chest tightens. Your mind starts racing through all the things you could say, should say, need to say to make them understand. And so you react. You fire back. You defend yourself. You explain. You argue. And for about 30 seconds, it feels like you won something. But you didn't win anything. You just gave away your peace. This is the trap most people live in without even realizing it. They spend their days reacting to comments, to opinions, to things people post online, to the tone someone used in a meeting, to a text that felt cold, to a look that seemed dismissive. And every single reaction costs something. It costs energy. It costs focus. It costs time you'll never get back. But most importantly, it costs your emotional stability. Here's what I want you to understand. When you react to everything, you control nothing. You become a puppet, and everyone else is holding the strings. Someone says something negative, and your whole mood shifts. Someone ignores you, and suddenly you're spiraling. Someone criticizes your work, and you spend the next 3 hours mentally arguing with them in the shower. That's not strength. That's slavery to other people's behavior. And the worst part is, most of the things we respond to don't even matter. Think about it. Think about the last 5 things that made you upset. How many of them will matter in a month? How many of them will matter in a year? Probably none. But at that moment, they felt like everything. They felt urgent. They felt personal. And so you gave them your attention, your energy, your words. But here's the truth. Nobody wants to accept. Most people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are. That comment that ruined your day, they forgot about it 5 minutes later. That person who disrespected you, they moved on before you even finished crafting your response. You're carrying weight they already dropped. And that weight is crushing you while they walk around completely unbothered. Silence is not about letting people walk over you. It's about refusing to trip over things that were never in your path to begin with. It's about recognizing that your energy is limited and choosing where to spend it. Some things deserve a response. Most things don't. And learning to tell the difference is one of the most important skills you'll ever develop. When you stop reacting to everything, something shifts. You start to feel lighter. You start to realize how much of your life was being consumed by noise. And in that space, in that quiet, you finally have room to think, to breathe, to actually live, instead of constantly defending your right to exist. Silence isn't weakness. It's a redirect. It's taking all that energy you would have wasted on arguments and opinions and putting it somewhere that actually matters. Yourself. Now here's the hard part. Knowing this and doing this are 2 completely different things. You can understand that silence is powerful. You can agree that reacting wastes energy. But the moment someone pushes your buttons, all that wisdom goes out the window. Because There's a voice in your head, and that voice doesn't want to be quiet. That voice wants to be heard. It wants to defend. It wants to prove. It wants the last word. And it's loud. It's convincing. It tells you that if you don't respond, you're letting them win. It tells you that silence means agreement. It tells you that people will think you're weak if you don't stand up for yourself. But that voice is lying to you. That voice isn't protecting you. It's keeping you trapped in a cycle of reaction that never ends. Because here's what happens when you respond. They respond back. And then you respond again. And suddenly you're 3 hours into an argument that started over nothing, and you're exhausted, and nothing has been resolved, and you feel worse than you did before it started. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're at work. Someone takes credit for something you did. Maybe in a meeting, maybe in an email, maybe just in a casual conversation with the boss, and you see it happen. Your stomach drops. Your face gets hot. Every part of you wants to speak up right then and there, to correct the record, to make sure everyone knows the truth. So you do. You interrupt. You clarify. You make it awkward. And sure, maybe you get the credit back. But now you've also created tension. Now you look defensive. Now people are uncomfortable. And that co-worker? They're not going to forget that you called them out publicly. You won the battle and started a war you didn't need. What if instead you stayed quiet? What if you let the moment pass, then later calmly, privately, addressed it with that person or your manager? What if you trusted that your work speaks for itself, that the people who matter already know what you contribute? That's restraint. That's maturity. And it's incredibly difficult to practice at the moment. Restraint isn't about suppressing your emotions. It's about choosing when and how to express them. It's about recognizing that not every feeling needs to become an action. You can feel angry without acting angry. You can feel hurt without lashing out. You can feel the urge to defend yourself and still choose to stay quiet. That gap between feeling and acting is where growth happens. That gap is where you stop being controlled by your emotions and start being guided by your values. And the more you practice living in that gap, the wider it becomes, the easier it gets. Until one day you realize that things that used to send you spiraling barely register anymore. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped letting every little thing dictate your state. There's a moment that changes everything. It doesn't happen in a big, dramatic way. There's no music playing in the background. No one applauds. It happens quietly, almost unnoticed, except by you. It's the first time you choose silence when everything in you wants to explode. Maybe someone insults you and you don't fire back. Maybe someone spreads a rumor and you don't defend yourself. Maybe someone pushes you to the edge, expecting a reaction, and you just look at them calmly and walk away. And in that moment, something shifts inside you. You feel it in your chest, a kind of power you've never felt before. Because here's what nobody tells you about silence. It's terrifying the first time. Your body isn't used to it. Your mind screams at you to do something, say something, fix something. You feel like you're going to burst if you don't respond, but you don't. You hold it, you breathe through it, and you survive. And then comes the surprise. Nothing falls apart. The world doesn't end. That person who was waiting for your reaction doesn't get what they wanted, and you can see it on their face. They expected fire, and you gave them nothing. And in that nothing, you took back your power. This is the turning point. This is where everything begins to change. Not because the situation changed, but because you did. You discovered that you have a choice, that you don't have to be pulled into every battle, that your piece is worth more than proving a point. I remember the first time I did this. Someone said something that a year earlier would have sent me into a full defensive spiral. I would have spent days crafting the perfect response, rehearsing arguments in my head, losing sleep over how to make them understand. But this time, I just let it go. I heard it, I felt the sting, and I chose not to engage. And nothing happened. That's the part that surprised me most. Nothing happened. They moved on. I moved on. And I realized that most of the battles I've been fighting my whole life were ones I created in my own head. The other person had already forgotten about it while I was still preparing my closing arguments. That silence taught me something words never could. It taught me that I don't need to be understood by everyone. I don't need to correct every mistake. I don't need to prove myself to people who've already made up their minds. I can just exist quietly, confidently, and let my actions do the talking. The turning point isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming selective. It's about realizing that your energy is your most valuable resource, and you get to decide who and what deserves it. Let's talk about what's really happening when you choose silence. Because it's not just about not speaking, it's about what's going on inside you while you're not speaking. And that's where the real work happens. Silence requires discipline. Not the kind of discipline that looks good on a resume, but the kind that happens in the dark, the kind no one sees. The kind where you're lying in bed at 3 a.m. and your mind wants to replay that conversation for the 100th time, and you have to actively choose to let it go. That's discipline. Most people think emotional control means not having emotions, but that's not it at all. Emotional control means having emotions and not letting them drive the car. You feel them. You acknowledge them, but you don't let them make your decisions. You're the one in charge, not your anger, not your fear, not your need to be right. This is mental fitness. And just like physical fitness, it takes practice. You don't go to the gym once and expect to be strong forever. You have to keep showing up. You have to keep doing the reps. And with emotional control, the reps are the moments when you want to react and you choose not to. Every time you pause instead of lashing out, you're building something. Every time you take a breath instead of firing off that text, you're getting stronger. Every time you choose peace over proving a point, you're training your mind to work for you instead of against you. And here's what happens over time. Your baseline changes. The things that used to trigger you don't hit the same way anymore. You develop what I call emotional shock absorbers. Life still throws things at you, but you're not thrown off balance as easily. You can handle more. You can stay calm in situations that would have destroyed you before, but this doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen without setbacks. There will be times when you lose it. Times when you react. Times when you say things you regret. And that's okay. That's part of the process. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is progress. The goal is that over time, those moments become less frequent and your recovery becomes faster. Inner stability isn't about being unshakable. It's about knowing you can shake and still stand. It's about trusting yourself to handle whatever comes, not because you're immune to pain, but because you've built the tools to process it. Silence is one of those tools, and the more you use it, the sharper it becomes. Now let me be honest with you about something. This path isn't easy. And there's a cost to it that nobody likes to talk about. When you start pulling back, when you stop chasing, when you let the silence do its work, you're going to feel lonely. And not just a little lonely, sometimes deeply, painfully lonely. Because the noise you are making, the constant reaching out, the over-explaining, the need to stay connected at all costs, all of that was filling a void. And when you stop, that void becomes visible. You'll sit with your phone and realise no one's texting. You'll have weekends where no one makes plans with you. You'll watch people you thought were close drift away without a second glance, and it's going to hurt. It's supposed to hurt. That's how you know it's real. But here's what I need you to understand. That loneliness is temporary. And more importantly, it's necessary. You can't rebuild your life while still holding on to the broken pieces. You can't find out who really cares while you're still forcing everyone to care. The silence shows you the truth, and the truth isn't always pretty. There will be resistance too, not just from inside yourself, but from other people. Some people won't like the new you. They'll say you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. They'll accuse you of being distant, cold, different, and they'll try to pull you back into old patterns because your growth makes them uncomfortable. It's a mirror they don't want to look into. This is where most people break. This is where they say silence isn't worth it, where they go back to chasing, back to overgiving, back to the familiar comfort of being needed, even if it means being used. And I get it. The old way is easier. It's predictable. It hurts in ways you're used to. But the new way, the way of silence and restraint and letting people miss you, it leads somewhere different. It leads to peace, real peace. Not the kind where you've just distracted yourself from the pain, but the kind where the pain has actually healed. On the other side of that loneliness is something you've been searching for your whole life: self-respect. The quiet confidence that comes from knowing you don't need anyone's validation to feel whole. The freedom of not being dependent on other people's attention. That's the reward. And it's worth every uncomfortable moment it takes to get there. Here's where it gets interesting. When you change, the world around you starts to change too, not all at once. Not dramatically, but slowly, noticeably, undeniably. People start treating you differently, and you'll notice it in small ways at first. Someone who used to talk over you starts waiting for you to finish. Someone who took you for granted starts checking in more often. Someone who never seemed to notice you suddenly seems very aware of your presence or your absence. This isn't magic, it's human nature. We value what's scarce. We pay attention to what's not always available. When you were always there, always reaching out, always filling the silence, you became predictable, and predictable gets taken for granted. But when you pull back, when you become less available, when your attention becomes something people have to earn, everything shifts. At work, you'll notice it. The colleague who used to dismiss your ideas starts listening more carefully. The boss who overlooked you starts asking for your input. Not because you demanded it, but because your silence created space for them to realise what they were missing. There's something powerful about being the calm person in a room full of chaos. People notice. People respect it. People want to be around it. In relationships, you'll notice it even more. That friend who only called when they needed something starts calling just to talk. That family member who never seemed interested suddenly wants to know how you're doing. And some people, the ones who are only there for what you could give them, they'll disappear entirely. And that's a gift, even though it doesn't feel like one at first. You'll also notice changes in yourself. You'll have more energy because you're not wasting it on drama. You'll have more clarity because you're not clouded by constant emotional noise. You'll make better decisions because you're not reacting from a place of fear or insecurity. Your life will start to feel like it actually belongs to you. And here's the beautiful part. The people who stay, the ones who reach out even when you're not chasing them, those are your people. Those are the relationships worth investing in. Those are the connections that will actually sustain you. Silence didn't push away the people who mattered. It just revealed who they were. Something happens when you stop reacting to everything. You start seeing everything more clearly, When you're not busy defending yourself, you can actually watch what's happening. When you're not preparing your response, you can actually listen to what people are saying. When you're not emotionally tangled up in every situation, you can observe it from a distance. And that distance changes everything. Think about it. How many times did reacting make things better? How many arguments did you win that actually improved your life? How many times did defending yourself change someone's mind about you? Probably not many. Probably most of the time, reacting just made things worse. It escalated situations that would have died on their own. It kept conflicts alive that were ready to end. It gave energy to things that didn't deserve it. But when you become the observer, you see patterns you couldn't see before. You notice who starts drama and who calms it. You notice who genuinely cares about you and who only cares about what you can do for them. You notice your own triggers, the things that set you off, and you can start to understand why. This is where real growth happens, not in the heat of the moment, but in the cool clarity of observation. You start to understand yourself better. You start to understand other people better. You start to make choices based on wisdom instead of impulse. Patience comes naturally when you're observing instead of reacting, because you understand that most situations don't need your immediate input. Most problems solve themselves if you give them time. Most people reveal their true intentions if you just watch long enough. You don't need to force anything. You don't need to fix anything. You can just be present and let things unfold. And here's what you'll find. The answers you've been desperately searching for, the ones you tried to argue your way to, the ones you exhausted yourself chasing, they come to you in silence. When your mind is quiet, when your emotions are settled, when you're not grasping for solutions, clarity arrives on its own. Like it was always there, just waiting for you to stop making so much noise so you could finally hear it. There's a kind of freedom that comes from mastering stillness. It's not the freedom to do whatever you want. It's the freedom from being controlled by things outside yourself. The freedom from needing approval. The freedom from caring what everyone thinks. The freedom from the exhausting performance of trying to be enough for people who will never be satisfied. This is emotional independence, and is one of the rarest things in the world. Most people spend their entire lives dependent on external validation. They need likes, compliments, attention, acknowledgement. They need to be told they're doing a good job. They need to feel wanted. And there's nothing wrong with wanting those things. We're human. Connection matters. But when you need those things to feel okay, when your sense of self depends on what other people think, you're never truly free. You're always one opinion away from falling apart. Mastery of stillness changes that. It builds a foundation inside you that doesn't shake when the outside world gets turbulent. You can receive criticism without crumbling. You can be ignored without spiraling. You can watch people leave and still feel whole. Not because you don't care, but because your worth isn't tied to their presence. This is maturity. Real maturity. Not the kind that comes with age, because plenty of old people are still chasing validation like teenagers. The kind that comes from doing the inner work, from sitting with discomfort, from choosing silence when everything in you wants to scream. And here's the truth about silence that most people miss. Silence isn't the absence of power. Silence is power. It's the power to choose, the power to not be baited, the power to let things go without needing closure, the power to walk away from tables where respect isn't being served. When you speak, you give people something to react to. When you argue, you give them ammunition. When you defend yourself, you validate their accusations. But when you're silent, when you're still, when you simply exist without performing, you become untouchable. Not in an arrogant way, in a peaceful way. in a way that says, I know who I am and I don't need you to confirm it. This doesn't happen overnight. It takes years of practice, years of failing and trying again, years of catching yourself mid-reaction and choosing differently. But every moment of stillness builds on the last. Every time you choose peace, you get better at choosing peace, until one day it's not a choice anymore. It's just who you are. And that's when silence finally spoke louder than anything else.